Right, so this may quite possibly be the most asked for video in the history of my channel. In fact, people have been asking me to make this video for over half a year at this point. Why did I put it off for so long? I'm not really sure, to be honest, your guess is as good as mine. The topic of today's video is Murder Drones Season 2, or more accurately, the fan-made Murder Drones Season 2 by Professor Sir, a name that is far too long for me to say over and over again in this video, so instead I will be calling him Jacob, because that's his name. Jacob here is an independent author who took particular interest in our Funny Robots series, and has constructed a series of videos going over a potential script for a second season of the show based on what was left unfinished by Liam and Glitch. Those of you who have watched any of my Murder Drones AU videos will recognise that he is not the first to do this, but the style in which it is done is very interesting to me. Rather than have an animation or a comic, Jacob has styled the telling of his story almost like an audiobook where he reads and acts out the characters and their lines. This is different to what I normally review, so there may be some winging it involved, but this intro is long enough already, so let's get into the plot of this story. Picking up several months after the conclusion of episode 8, V spends much of her time out in the open air looking for anything to do. Checking out abandoned buildings, looking for the odd worker drone corpse that had been incinerated by the solver, or pretty much anything else. On this particular trip, she stumbles across a rather well-laid trap by Jay to try and lure her in using a radio. Jacob has taken the Jay no longer has an adequate food source route post the solver death, so the version of her we see in season 2 is mangled and malnourished, right on death's doorstep. As such, even though she gets the drop on V, her limited energy is quickly depleted and she ends up headfirst in a pile of snow, with V showing some mercy and flying off back to meet the rest of the group. She meets up with Uzi and N of course, but also Lizzie and Thad, who are to play a little bit more of a role in this story. The group are doing some filler activities when she returns, but appears very distant because the interaction with Jay has shaken her up, to the point where everyone notices pretty much immediately. In her usual fashion, V dismisses N's concern, but Uzi's solver tail decides to pipe up, saying it knows exactly what happened because apparently that's a thing it can do now. Back at Ye Olde Dorman residence, Khan and Nori are working on a new body for the latter. This will be important later. Uzi and N still have some questions regarding V's interaction with Jay due to her being stubborn as hell, and both the parents recommend asking Lizzie alone since she's always on that damn phone with V anyway. This will not be important later. Thankfully for the audience, we get to see what happens with Jay anyway. I'll skip the drawn out Shakespearean scene, she dies of hunger. Honestly, if you'd gotten to that point I would have taken the laser cannon to my skull. At least then someone would have actually been hit with it. Yes, I'm still vexed about that. Not one shot with these cannons landed all season. But if you've learned anything from this show, you should know that we have a closet full of Jays ready to be released as soon as one dies. And that is the case here. Only this time it's a little bit different. Our new Jay is smaller, missing part of her head, and is accompanied by what I can only describe as an Afghanistan veteran N with an unfortunate extension to his name. Now it's time to cut back to the Dorman house for that thing I mentioned would be important later, that being Nori finally attempting to use the new body she and Khan constructed. But of course, like any couple trying to build something that is completely necessary to their survival, they screw it up royally and end up almost killing each other. More specifically, Nori goes all X-Face for a few seconds and nearly tears a few arms off because apparently some of the code and machinery they used came from a robotic cat. I wish I was making this up. N and Uzi have rightfully had enough of this and think it's a good idea to go investigate the loud bang they heard a minute ago caused by the landing pod crashing into the planet's surface. V, Lizzie and Thad have already pulled up to the crater and look ready to take on our new J and N, who are going to be referred to as Jazz and Ned for the rest of the story. Ned seems to have it in his head that V is inherently evil and wants to kill them, while Jazz is trying to be a little bit more civil about things. After far too much back and forth, our original group come to learn that these two believe that Sin is still around and currently making her way to the planet. And that is where we're going to stop the explanation of the story so far. And yes, I am going to be splitting this into two parts. Partially because I have university and a job to attend to and thus have very little time, and partially because I rather like this story and don't want to blow through the whole thing at once. Because the list of things I don't like about this production is much shorter, I will start with that first. Keep in mind, I'm going exclusively off what is seen in the first two episodes here. I will first touch on a couple of continuity/understanding of the world errors. In the first episode of the new season, the solver tail attached to Uzi suggests that it knows that V interacted with Jay and uses evidence of some unsealed scars on V's form to prove it. This is wrong for two reasons. The Murder Drone's healing factor is fast enough that in the time it took V to fly back to the others after her encounter with Jay, it would be more than long enough to completely heal her injuries. We see in episode 3 during the prom scene that V goes from missing several limbs to completely fine in just a couple of minutes. The second problem is the solver is not able to track and locate the Murder Drones to know that they interacted. The episode 8 hallway scene is a prime example of this. N is all of a meter away from this hand, yet the solver can't tell he is there. In its weakened state now, there is absolutely no way it would be able to track the locations of two drones several kilometers away. The other problem I have is with the Nori goes insane scene. For the most part, it's completely fine, but Jacob references an X face appearing on Nori's monitor, which doesn't work. Now this would go over the head of the average viewer, and Jacob himself probably doesn't even know this, but I understand these drones more than my own family, so I know that this screen is only able to appear when a worker drone operating system is shut down. We see that in the murder drones when only their killing code is active, and we see it in the episode 5 manner with the drones that are shut down. In this instance, Nori should be like them. There is no alternative code she can have running to keep her body active. The solver isn't present anymore, and she doesn't have any other operating system built in, so it can't happen. My other big criticism of this story comes down to the way it is delivered. He appears to be recording this, or at least big segments of it, in one take, which is very impressive, but leads to moments where he says the wrong thing or gets caught on his own words that have been left in. It's not very hard to fix this, and it just seems like a bit of an oversight. Also, in keeping with the trend of every male audiobook reader ever, my man cannot do a female voice to save his life. I would honestly much rather you just say it normally than put this ridiculous accent on. But now let's have a look at the things I like about this story, because there are plenty of them. The first big hit for me is the way that the characters are handled. Uzi, N, and V especially stay very true to their canon selves, and the story goes out of its way to emphasize that. It also makes a better effort to include Thad, Lizzie, and Khan, who all definitely deserved more screen time in the show itself. But the effort to give them more interesting traits is very welcome. By far the best characterization here though is Jay, and I mean the full Jay, not 50% off Jay. Even though she only appears for the first episode, Jay is far and away the most compelling character in season 2 so far. Despite the fact that she is a robot, was one of the main villains in season 1 and completely ended up in this situation due to her own actions, you can't help but feel bad for her. She is alone, the only thing she believed in is pretty much dead, and she is left to salvage for scraps on a dead planet just to survive. She doesn't get to keep up the quips, the snide comments, she doesn't get a glorious death in battle, she just loses. And it's horrible to watch. I'm going to refrain from making a judgment on the two new drones here because I haven't seen very much of them, so that will come in part 2. Now, looking at the story itself, we can see the fact that Jacob has some experience with writing a cohesive narrative here, because it is blended very well together. Even without all of the proper visuals, the story is very easy to follow and it keeps a good ebb and flow of story progression and character moments. If I were to criticize it just a little, I'd say it becomes a little too dialogue heavy in certain aspects, especially near the end of episode 2, but that is coming from the perspective of someone who is used to the very action-packed and fast-paced style of Liam Vickers, so this may be better or worse depending on the listener. And that's about all I've got to say. Jacob, if you're watching this, which there is a very real possibility that you are, well done on making a fantastic project, and I can't wait to take a look at the rest of what you have to offer. To my regular viewers, I'm sorry the last couple of videos have been a little bit shorter. Doing university full-time is hard. And for the fans of my channel who also happen to like a certain Sony production that released on Netflix recently, make sure to stay tuned because that video is next. But that's all I've got for today, thank you all for watching, and have a good one.